Thank you. I really appreciate the invitation. I told Alan before earlier tonight that this is hard for me because I'm a classroom teacher normally by day, so my desire to stand here at the podium and talk, I would much prefer to be wandering around the room talking to you, but I will do my best for the cameras and for the microphone here to stay here. I am Ed Colley. I'm Director of Castaic Lake Water Agency, and I appreciate very, very much the opportunity to introduce this chloride study that we are championing, I think is the best word. I'm not here to talk about the rate increases that Alan is going to talk about a little bit later, so they are sort of two separate issues. This issue, however, is tied to potential future rate increases if we cannot find adequate solutions to the chloride problems, and we are forced to deal with them by building some pretty expensive infrastructure. Do I have a clicker that I can... Ah, you hit it. Yeah, in plain sight. All right, press the arrow, got it. All right, Castaic Lake Water Agency, our service area obviously serves most of the Santa Clarita Valley. That big outline in black, most of you live within that. This map does show the different colors from the different agencies we serve water to. We are a wholesaler of water to the valley. We have about 260,000 customers. We serve 195 square miles. We normally deliver up to about 45,000 acre feet per year. The last couple of years, it's actually been down, and which is good news. That says a lot about the folks in this valley doing your part to conserve water, which we've asked for. It's very important, and really the residents of this valley have responded to many things, several things, I guess, over the years that we've asked for in a very positive way. We serve 4 different retailers. The Los Angeles County Water Works District 36 is the smallest of those. Newhall County Water District serving 3 distinct areas, furthest edge of Canyon Country, some of Newhall, and then Castaic. The Santa Clarita Water Division is actually a wholly owned division now of the Castaic Lake Water Agency, but it is a retail arm for many of you here in Canyon Country. We do serve your water. And then Valencia Water Company, which is the only for-profit private company that we serve. They're also the largest retailer in the valley. Then I've listed 5 of our supplies of water. The first there is our main bread and butter, if you will. We have 95,000 acre feet of what we call Table A allotment through the State Water Project. That 95,000 is not a number that we actually get. Every year we get some percentage of that 95,000. If we ever got 100%, we'd get 95. This year coming up is a relatively wet year. Most of you are aware that the Sierras have gotten great snow. It has been a relatively wet winter. And so our current allocation is 70% of that 95,000. We also have 11,000 acre feet of firm supply that we have contracted with 2 different water agencies up in the Kern County area. They've backed that water up with several decades of water banking programs from high-flow Kern River water to which they have the rights, and they also replenish that supply all the time. So we have a firm supply through that program of 11,000 acre feet. Then we have some Yuba County Accord water, which is a relatively small amount. We currently deliver 500 acre feet of water approximately per year of recycled water. And I put that in red because I'm going to mention recycled water throughout this talk, and the recycled water is the core reason that the Castaic Lake Water Agency is very, very concerned, besides just being citizens, but it's this recycled water and the potential of increasing the recycled water supply that is tied so closely to the sanitation district. Obviously, it's their output that we are then recycling. So it's that water we're trying to preserve and actually increase into the future. Finally, we do have several water banking programs, Semi-Tropic and Rosedale Rio Bravo storage programs. We have currently 146,000 acre feet approximately in storage. Note that's not acre feet per year, that's just the raw number, 146,000 acre feet of water. This graph I took out of, I believe, the 2005 Urban Water Management Plan, and it basically shows you all those different supplies that I just talked about on the last page, and they're stacked up. Do I have a laser? Yes, I do have a laser, right? Okay, so they're stacked up here, and on the very top here, you'll see that green. Well, the slide demonstrates that it's that green that we intend to grow to increase the supply primarily. So that recycled water is critical to us to meet the demands. If you look at the red demand here, that is the demand without any conservation assumed. That's just historical demand based on normal usage the people in this valley have done over many years. And of course, as we anticipate that we will have further construction going on in the valley, that demand would increase. Now we have in the 2005 plan a demand with a 10% conservation. That conservation is actually by law going to have to increase from 20% or up to 20% in 2020. However, we can call, if you will, conservation this recycled water. And so even if we stayed at the 10% conservation and we had the recycled water, we would be okay. Here just show the Santa Clara River watershed. The probably most important thing here is in every reach, in every place, the Water Quality Control Board has said in the past that what they intend to enforce on us is having 100 milligrams per liter of chloride in every part of that river. That could be a fairly difficult thing to reach and would have been mighty expensive for us in this valley to pay for if we actually had to live with that. So the compliance, in order to get to that 100 milligrams per liter, which is the alternative one as far as the Regional Water Quality Control Board goes, to do that there would be two different ways. First would be to use advanced treatment or reverse osmosis at both of the plants and basically treating all of the wastewater going through those plants and putting a relatively large brine line all the way out to the ocean. That'd be 43 miles of piping in order to get rid of that now concentrated chloride and other components, wastewater, and then of course the majority of the water would be released into the river. You'd be essentially putting bottled water quality water into the river at that point. Another option was to do the same reverse osmosis treatment but on a much smaller scale and take the majority of the output of the plant and just put it into a huge pipeline and take almost all of it and put it out to the river. You would have to have this minimum treated water in doing that just to take care of the river, the minimum river flows for the various wildlife and plant life and whatnot that are in the riverbed itself. So those two estimated costs, both of them were on the order of $500 million, 500 million or so, give or take, very round numbers, of course. And so those were looked at and thought, well, we could probably do better. So the Cass Lake Water Agency and the Sanitation District and many other leaders in the community got together and there was a study done and a lot of work put in order to come up with what was called the Alternative Water Resources Management Plan. Now, or AWRM for short. The Sanitation District, incidentally, didn't like the acronym AWRM, and they changed it to something else. But I'm going to still use AWRM. The idea of the AWRM was to provide a solution that would basically meet the needs of all of the users, hopefully, and through what we call site-specific objectives, or SSOs, which are something greater than 100 milligrams per liter, and depending on which reach of the river and the needs of the different interests on that reach of the river, the site-specific objectives would change. So if nothing else changed from this point forward, the Water Quality Control Board and the Ventura interests, they intend to have us do this alternative to the Alternative Water Resources Management Plan. The price tag for that would be, the estimates are around $210,000 or $210 million. Sorry, you could afford the thousand. But the Castaic Lake Water Agency and others in the community have looked at this and thought, well, we can probably do better. And there's a very, very important component in that the chlorides that went into this A-worm, the assumption at the time that was done, the time that work was done, the assumption was that the chlorides coming to us from the State Water Project in the past would look the same in the future. Okay? Well, that assumption, I don't believe, and many others don't believe, is good, an accurate assumption. I believe that those chlorides will change. So the Alternative Water Resources Management Program has several different, or quite a few different components to it. A few of the highlights here. First, the intent was to get rid of the self-regenerated water softeners. That, again, another thing the community was asked to do. The community has basically done that. That was huge, and without that, none of the other solutions other than the $500 million solution would have been possible. They also, at the plants, have converted, or in the process of converting, to the ultraviolet disinfection by not putting chlorine in as your final disinfectant. There's some chloride savings there. A critical component of the A-worm is building this smaller 3 million gallon per day reverse osmosis plant. If we built that plant, you would have to put the brine disposal somewhere, and there are some abandoned oil wells, very deep wells, that were looked at that could probably take the brine from that and save you from building an ocean outfall. So I put that in red because, again, this is one of the things that I think could change based on this chloride study. The A-worm program also envisions some dilution waters from the Castaic Lake Water Agency. It envisions building some infrastructure out in Piru, the cost of which would be shared between the users in this valley and the users in Ventura. It envisions an alternative water supply to the one ranch, Camarillos Ranch, out in Ventura County. It's not certain that would change, so I didn't put it in red. But the entire A-worm project was designed in part to make sure that we supported the potential water recycling, or the recycling program I've told you is so important to the Castaic Lake Water Agency. The change there is we think that this chloride study may actually improve our ability to do that. A small amount, but it's still significant. The A-worm, the key to it is revising the water quality objectives, those site-specific objectives that made the whole thing possible. And we believe that this is the key. If you can meet all of those objectives, then the downstream users should be, they agree that that's what they need. We shouldn't need to do anything more if they can be done without spending $210 million or more. So here I just sort of real quick wanted to point out the costs. Those alternative 1, A and B, if you will, they're either very, very expensive in terms of energy or in terms of recycled water that you would give up. And the Alternative Water Resource Management Program would require far less energy going forward, and we would lose almost none of the recycled water going forward as well. So I need to, I'm sorry if it appears I'm kind of jumping around, but these things all do relate back to this chloride problem. I need to give you a little bit of idea of where the chloride problem originates. The California water supply system, the State Water Project, is shown here in green, and there's a couple of green dots representing reservoirs and all. But all of the water flows through the delta. And here's kind of a artist's rendition of what the delta would look like. The water, most of it comes down the Sacramento River here. It flows out towards the ocean. If you had a picture right here, you'd see that this over here on the edge is the San Francisco Bay. And of course, that's salt water over there. And that water that comes down, water does pretty much what it wants to do, and there's a lot of tidal mixing and whatnot, but eventually it needs to come up here, come down, and ends up in the forebay to be pumped into the State Water Project. Now, unfortunately, there are chlorides picked up in this process. There's a little bit of chloride, of course, just from any surface water flow. You're going over a variety of minerals, you're going to pick some of those up. But frankly, the Sacramento River's got some pretty nice water in it from a chloride standpoint. If we were to be able to take that water directly, it'd be no problem at all. Unfortunately, you have seawater out there that has got tidal flows, so the tides come up and down. So sometimes when the tide is up, of course, the tide flows into the delta instead of the water flowing from the delta out to the ocean. When you take that tidal flow, which is at 19,000 milligrams per liter, or 190 times what the Water Quality Resources Board wants us to put into the river, you can see that this is going to be a problem. Okay? When you mix that kind of water, you don't need to mix very much of it in before it can be quite a problem. Now, when the river is flowing a lot, when we have a wet winter and we're able to release a lot of water from the reservoirs, and the rivers are flowing out towards the ocean at a pretty high rate, you don't have very much of this seawater problem. Unfortunately, the converse is true. When you have low flows, when you have relatively dry years, the tidal flows, that water mixes in and you get an increased saltwater intrusion or increased chloride. Over the years, the environmental flows coming through the delta, or the water reserved for fish in the environment in general, those have increased. So that is a fundamental change that we did not have 10, 20 years ago, having more water by design flowing on average to the ocean. I also note that in the first 6 months of the year, in a typical year, you've got very low chlorides being sucked into the State Water Project, typically less than 50 milligrams per liter. And there's a lot of storage of water that goes on during that, of course, those wetter months. It's the reverse river flows that ultimately bring that seawater or that salt water to the pumps. And if we have pumping restrictions for smelt or salmon or other fish and other reasons, those pumping restrictions will tend to also limit the amount of salt water that's brought into the State Water Project. Once the water is into the State Water Project, there are a variety of possible dilution sources. Note that the State Water Project conveyance is shared by everybody. So we can't just go out and find our own water north of here and put it in the State Water Project and take only our water back out, because it's all just water. It mixes in the canal, obviously. So, but anybody else or anything else that happens to be put into the canal dilutes potentially that chloride in the State Water Project. Groundwater banking programs have been around for quite a long time, but over the last decade, they've grown substantially. And what happens is that during dry years, of course, if you remember from the last little bit I talked about, during the low flow periods, that's dry years, there's more chloride sucked into the pumps and at the beginning of the canal but there are also more people increasing the pump back of the groundwater in those dry years because there isn't as much water available through the delta. And so what we've seen, I think, is that this pump back in dry years is increasing because all of us down south here, we're all looking for these groundwater banking programs, and we're all using them increasingly as time goes on. Those groundwater banking programs almost all have access to very low chloride, as far as chloride goes, very high quality water. And again, nobody can put it in and take it out molecule for molecule. Anything that gets put in that's low chloride, you get to take the average back out. So our average is going to be diluted by not only our own groundwater banking programs, but those of, say, Met. They pump a lot of water. There are also possibilities of future dilution. Well, today even, there is some off-stream storage that helps to dilute the water, and the off-stream storage is likely to increase in the future. And off-stream storage, I intend to think more here of surface storage, and again, it needs to be south of the delta in order to do us any good. But those programs may increase in the future. And then we, of course, have the local Saugus Formation groundwater that we intend to use in dry years in an increasing, potentially more in the future than we have in the past. And that Saugus Formation water, while, to be frank, it's not the highest quality water that you folks want because it's got a lot of minerals in it, it happens to be low in chloride. So as far as the chloride issue goes, Saugus Formation water is a help. This graph is maybe one of my most important ones, and it demonstrates basically why we believe that this chloride study is important. You'll notice that it's just the chloride concentration in Castaic Lake, okay, where we get our state water. The last 3 years, we've had quite a drought. If we looked in the history and if we were able to find a real similar drought, there isn't one, no two droughts are the same, but we expected that the chloride level was going to go way over 80 during a pretty significant drought. It didn't. Whatever is going on in the State Water Project, all of these factors that I just talked about that we have not yet quantified, something's going on, and something kept these numbers under 80 milligrams per liter of chloride in Castaic Lake. If that's your water supply at 80, we can meet already today, we can meet and would meet the site-specific objectives that are discussed in the Alternative Water Resources Management Plan. Okay, so it is the fact that this didn't spike any higher that is critical. So what we hope is that this study will assess the impacts of the current through the Delta operations and all the different things I discussed there as far as environmental water and other, a lot of things going on there. Would assess the impacts of other water management programs, specifically water banking programs, particularly groundwater banking programs are probably the biggest component of this, and assess how they were likely to impact the state water project in the future. And then we would hope that they would be able to come up with a prediction, a statistical model telling us how likely different chloride loads would be in the future given different hydrological scenarios. Ultimately then, applying those scenarios to what we're likely to see as far as chloride loading in the State Water Project, applying that to the existing Alternative Water Resources Management Program and figuring out what pieces of that we're likely to be able to either change or simply not do. Optimally, okay, this is my pie in the sky, okay, what I hope could happen, and again, these are not promises, okay, not election promises, not promises of any kind, but they are, in my own mind, what the best possible outcome might be. We could identify significant reductions in chloride loading, especially in the dry years when we expect to have the biggest problem, as compared to the original study conducted by the Sanitation District. Mind you, I'm not criticizing the Sanitation District's study. It was the best available data at the time. We've only recently realized that those high levels of chloride, something is happening and they're not materializing, so we need to quantify that. I would hope that the need for the reverse osmosis treatment, which is one of the most expensive parts of the A-worm, would be reduced or even possibly eliminated. I would hope that, of course, means that the program objectives, the site-specific objectives, could be achieved at a much reduced cost. I don't have any estimates of what that would be. That's why the study. Finally, and I put this in italics only because it's a very long range, but ultimately this problem would go away if we completely bypassed the delta and didn't have your drinking water mixing with the seawater in the first place, which in my mind remains the ultimate solution. Unfortunately, as I've said to this body in the past, that's well more than a decade off. Okay, it's in the state of California, the environmental laws and the different things that we have to do to get that done make that a very long-range solution. So, do I have any time for questions? How'd I do? Oh, I need to stay here for the camera, don't I? I hate this.
Thank you, Ed, for your presentation. It was very insightful. Long, but insightful. And these things need to be. One of the things that I just want to touch on, and was, again, the impetus for my running for Castaic Lake Water Agency, and just to clarify, it was for the Castaic Lake Water Agency and not against you, okay, was that I felt, and I still continue to feel, that the Castaic Lake Water Agency is falling down on the job when it comes to working as an agency with the bureaucracy up in Sacramento, as well as agencies around California that use state water, to replace the aging Delta system with a conveyance system that not only would prevent the chlorides from coming into the water, but other biological elements which have to be treated here in the Santa Clarita Valley with heavy chemical substances like chloramines, which is chlorine and ammonia. Can you talk a little bit more about perhaps what the Castaic Lake Water Agency is planning on doing to create the ultimate solution, as you suggest, rather than all these piecemeal opportunities?
I would love to have the opportunity to fully explore your question, okay? And my suggestion is that you ask Alan if it's something that he can fit into the schedule sometime in the future. But if, as you point out, that just this piecemeal, as you called it, having this one component took me a half hour of explanation, or I guess 25 minutes. Your question is not one I can do in the 5-minute allotted for the question. So, but I'd be delighted to. I'm not trying to say it's not a legitimate question. It is. It's a great question. And if Alan has an opportunity in the future to put that on the agenda, I'd be delighted to come and to talk about my views on the ultimate solution to the State Water Project and what we don't call the peripheral canal. Okay, the peripheral canal is bad politically. So, alternative conveyance.
Any other questions, sir?
Mr. Dunn.
Yes, the piecemeal is okay, fine, because in many cases it could be a much less expensive way to go. There are quite a number of suggestions been made by the public when the sanitation held its big meeting at City Hall, and some of them were a lot less than 210 million or 500 million. What you didn't explain, even though you're very thorough in your explanation to this group and to the public, is how a little of the time that we're out of compliance on the chlorides. That's kind of an important thing. It only happens during drought, and it doesn't happen continuously during drought. That would be an interesting thing for them to know. Also, the public should know that there's only the strawberry farmers and the avocado farmers that have been complaining for 10 years that the salt's harming their crop, and they continue over the 10 years and to this day to have bumper crops. And they have no scientific evidence that it's hurting their crops. So that would be one of the things for CLWA to possibly look at, find out the scientific evidence. For the peripheral canal and the State Water Project, many countries gave up aqueducts centuries ago. We have aqueduct running through this state. It's running through earthquake country, can fail any time. And every year for you to have water, you must get rain and snow. That's like going to Vegas and shooting a crapshoots table. If you are going to spend the money it would take to go around and do the so-called peripheral up there at the Delta.
You can't say that, remember?
Yeah,
we're not talking about peripheral canal.
You might spend the same money along the coast. The Pacific Ocean isn't going to go dry, and put your reverse osmosis there, have pure water coming out, drought-proof, don't have to worry about the rain. Those are a few of the things. But like I say, your piecemeal, as many others, even to use the DWP's aqueduct that goes right through this valley to bring water here, and other systems that were suggested at the City Hall meeting.
I agree with what you said about the chlorides and as they pertain to my discussion here. Absolutely, you are correct. The amount of time that we would be over even the 100 is a relatively small amount of time, very brief periods, only during drought. And you're absolutely correct about the downstream users and having no scientific evidence. I don't think the Castaic Lake Water Agency is the right agency to pursue the scientific studies. I think the sanitation district thought that they were and wanted to, and we're busy doing that when the Regional Water Quality Control Board basically shut them down, as I understand it. So they believe they are, they believe they should, as far as I know. As far as your suggestion that we can do reverse osmosis on the coast and create drinking water that way, I would suggest that that's probably not the optimum solution in a place that has fresh water available. To invest that kind of energy when our energy needs are so great for so many things already, and the cost of energy are going up, and you see even nuclear now. Japan, as we mentioned at the beginning of this, there are problems with the energy, and anything that you do to create fresh water from seawater involves a huge amount of energy. And so I'm not a fan of doing reverse osmosis to treat wastewater, to treat seawater, to do any of these things if you have fresh water available. All right, I think I'm looking at the hook here, so I thank you very much. It's up to you if you. I see a hand. I don't know. It's up to you if you want to.
Cameron Smythe recently came out with that he's opposed to the new treatment you're proposing for treating the water instead of the current system. And I just read that recently. He says that as far as quality of the water, it would be far worse. And actually, I think he's trying to put some legislation through with regard to that. What is your opinion with regard to that? He was very upset about the fact that I forget the name that you referenced in your comments, but that shouldn't be considered because as far as the carcinogenic creation, it is far worse than what you're currently using, which also creates a certain amount of carcinogenics. But what is your feeling about that? And as far as the problem you're having here, you've had since 1979, I believe, to address this and to come back to the people now with any huge amount of $500 million, $250 million is just outrageous because what it came down to is everyone ignoring it up into this point and allowing all this development to take place where you're now saying you're going to have to rely on what we call potty water, reclaimed water, to meet your standards. And some people may find that objectionable.
Okay. Boy, there's a whole lot of things in there, so I'm going to forgive me if I don't answer every one of them because, wow. Potty water, the recycled water will obviously not be used for potable purposes. We'll be using that for outdoor irrigation. That's all of the recycled water is scheduled to go into what we call purple pipe. So it's not going to go into our potable water supply. Your comment about Cameron. Oh, you made a comment. I'm not advocating anything here tonight as far as the $500 million or the $210 million dollar programs. I'm advocating changing the AWORM program, or looking into the AWORM program, making sure that we meet those objectives. If we have to meet those objectives, doing it at the least possible cost to you, the ratepayer. And I don't think that Cameron Smythe would be opposed to that. I think you're correct in that Cameron is not in favor of spending this amount of money on these programs to meet the downstream interests, the farmers' interests.